What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, it's pretty clear what I'm talking about. We're doing a comparison between SAUCONY Endorphin Pro 3 and ASICS MetaSpeed Sky Plus. Let's get into it. Okay, there are a lot of similar things about the Endorphin Pro 3 and the MetaSpeed Sky Plus, but let's get started with price because the Endorphin Pro 3 is only $225 and the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is $250. Now, even though there is a $25 premium on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus, I don't think that $25 is enough to put anyone off buying this shoe. I know the Endo Pro 3 is a bit cheaper, but honestly, when you're spending over $200, it seems like an extra $20 just isn't that big of a concern. Oh, and full disclosure, Saucony was kind enough to send me the Endorphin Pro 3 for the purpose of review, and ASICS did not send me this shoe. I paid for this with my own money. With that said, no one at ASICS or Saucony is going to see this video before you do on YouTube. Alright guys, let's talk about weight, because when we're buying a super shoe, weight is pretty important. Like, we are buying these shoes because we want to go fast, and we all know weight holds us back. Saucony claims that a US men's size 9 is 7.2 ounces or 204 grams. ASICS says that a US men's size 9 is also 7.2 ounces, but it weighs 205 grams. So although both shoes are equal if we weigh them in ounces, the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is 1 gram heavier. Let's see what happens when we extrapolate it out to my size, a US men's size 13, UK size 12. In my size, the Endorphin Pro 3 tips the scale at 8.9 ounces or 251 grams. The MetaSpeed Sky, on the other hand, tips the scale at 8.8 ounces or 250 grams. So even though in the sample size, US men's size 9, the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is 1 gram heavier, when we get up to my size, the Endorphin Pro 3 overtakes the MetaSpeed Sky and it is now 1 gram heavier. But that's not the end of the story. And this next part I'm kind of hesitant to tell you about, but you'll know when I'm testing a new pair of shoes and I have a particularly hard workout, I like to throw the shoes on the scale after that workout. The only thing is, I don't record what workouts I do. If I sweat a lot and the shoe feels a bit squishy, I'll throw them on the scale, because honestly, I'm looking for bigger numbers. I want to show you guys that these shoes gain weight when they get wet. So with that said, I want you to take this next bit with a pinch of salt, because when I threw on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus after a workout, my size increased to 10.1 ounces or 284 grams. When I threw the Endorphin Pro 3 on the scale after a workout, it had increased to 10.4 ounces or 291 grams. So remember, they're about the same size, but the Endorphin Pro 3 gained a little more weight. Just to break it down a little bit more, the MetaSpeed Sky Plus gained 13.6% in weight, whereas the Endorphin Pro 3 gained 17.92% in weight. Like I said, don't take that information to the bank. It's very likely that it wasn't as hot, or I wasn't running as hard on my workout where I put the MetaSpeed Sky Plus on the scale after, but it's interesting. Now, both of these shoes, you can see, have a pretty substantial stack height. We got a lot of midsole, and the MetaSpeed Sky Plus has 39 millimeters in the heel, 34 millimeters in the forefoot for a 5 millimeter drop. The Endorphin Pro 3 has 39.5 millimeters in the heel, 31.5 millimeters in the forefoot for an 8 millimeter drop. I guess it all comes down to what type of runner you are. But we're going to get to which I prefer in just a second. Both shoes are neutral and both shoes fit true to size. However, the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is made for stride runners. And remember, the MetaSpeed Edge Plus is made for cadence runners. And in all honesty, I think the MetaSpeed Edge Plus would be a better comparison to the Endorphin Pro 3 just because the Edge Plus has an 8 millimeter drop, but we have to use what we have on hand. The upper of both shoes have a very transparent single layer mesh, and both shoes have very minimal overlays, obviously to save weight. When we look at the heel collars of both of these shoes, we can see they are both fairly thin, but the MetaSpeed Sky Plus has a little bit more padding around the heel collar. The Endorphin Pro 3 is quite a bit slimmer. However, both of these shoes were very comfortable around my heel collar. They gave me a good lockdown. I didn't experience any heel slip in either of these shoes. The heel counter on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus it's actually quite rigid, especially when you compare it to the Endorphin Pro 3. We can see that I can push that down just a little bit more. It's almost like the heel counter is a bit slimmer in the back and it's kind of given that rigidity right down the middle, whereas on the MetaSpeed Edge Plus, it's a little more traditional, it's a little wider. Before we get down to the midsole, I want to talk about styling. And I gotta say, this is an area that I cannot say which one I like better. I really like both these colorways, and I think both the Endo Pro 3 and the MetaSpeed Sky Plus have done a phenomenal job making really solid looking shoes. The only slight thing I would give the Endo Pro 3 extra points for is they have kind of a glittery filament woven into the upper, so it gives it more of a mermaid look. I kind of like that. The tongue on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is extremely thin, and when I say extremely thin, I'm not exaggerating. It is like a wafer thin piece of almost suede. I'm sure it's not suede, but it kind of feels like suede. It is not gusseted. Now there is a lace loop right on top, which helps keep the tongue in place when it's locked down, and there are some perforations in the tongue as we get down towards the upper, just helping with ventilation. Now, even though the tongue on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is not gusseted, I haven't experienced any heel slip in any of my runs in the shoe. The tongue on the Endo Pro 3 it's also very thin. Definitely a race tongue, but it is not as thin as the MetaSpeed Sky Plus. The tongue on the Endo Pro 3 has 3 big holes coming down the midfoot, which I think is just to help with ventilation, and then around those holes there are little perforations in the tongue just to keep your foot nice and cool. The tongue on the Endo Pro 3 is fully gusseted, and there is no lace loop in the middle to hold the tongue in place, but in both cases, gusseted, non-gusseted, lace loop, non-lace loop. In all my runs, I haven't experienced any times where the tongue has been slipping down to the side. Once I get these shoes tied on and get a good lockdown, they tend to stay that way. But let's talk about laces. Now, the laces on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus are very similar to other shoes that you might have seen, other race shoes. They almost have little teeth on them, so when you tie it in a knot and you cinch it down, it's almost like those little teeth lock in together. Never had an issue with the laces on the MetaSpeed Sky coming undone. The laces on the Endo Pro 3 are not like that. They don't have little ribs. In fact, the laces are just kind of normal laces. Now, to be completely honest, I haven't had any issues with the Endorphin Pro 3 laces coming untied when I'm out on a run, when I'm out on a workout. But it's only when I was taking these shoes out back to back that I really noticed that I like how the MetaSpeed Sky laces tie better than I do the Endo Pro 3. And guys, I gotta say, this is just personal preference. It's not like the laces on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus work any better than the Endo Pro 3. It just, when I'm tying them next to each other, it kind of seems like the Endorphin Pro 3 could come untied. I don't know. And guys, if you have any experience in either of these shoes, let me know in the comments what you found. Oh guys, and while both Saucony and ASICS are using recycled materials in their shoe, the Endorphin Pro 3 is vegan. If that is something you look for in a super shoe, drop a comment of a plant emoji. Okay, let's get down to the outsole. Okay, let's get down to the midsole. Because guys, these are super shoes and the midsole is where the magic happens. Now, both these versions have made huge improvements over their previous versions. The MetaSpeed Sky Plus has 5 extra millimeters of Flight Foam Blast Plus Turbo foam in the midsole. The Endorphin Pro 3 has an extra 4 millimeters of Power Run PB foam in the midsole. And what that does is provide both shoes with a pretty cushy ride. And I don't know about you, but when I'm strapping on a shoe that I want to run fast in, that I want to run long in, so we're talking half marathon to marathon distance, I am really looking for a bit of cushion. Like, I don't want my body to be beat up at the end of a race. It used to happen, but not since we've got these super thick slabs of foam on the bottom of our shoes have I really felt beat up after running a marathon. And guys, I gotta tell you, the foams are actually pretty similar. As in, they feel pretty similar underfoot. I'm gonna say that the Endorphin Pro 3 is just slightly softer than the MetaSpeed Sky Plus, but the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is still a pretty soft ride. Both shoes have full-length carbon fiber plates. So let's talk about ride, because we can talk about the materials and the technology that these companies put into these shoes. But guys, when it comes down to it, Saucony and ASICS are putting hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know if it's that much, but they're putting a lot of money into R&D. So we can make a pretty safe assumption that they have tested these shoes and the results are pretty pleasing. Pleasing enough for them to put out and charge a premium price for them. And both of these shoes give you what you want in a super shoe. They give you a nice soft landing, and the carbon fiber plate gives you a very pleasant feeling of energy return and moving you forward. However, the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is a little bit more aggressive in its feeling of moving you forward. And I'm not saying that that means the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is better than the Endorphin Pro 3. What I'm saying is, I think it comes down to how you run. And I have to say that I think these two shoes are for two different runners. Because the MetaSpeed Sky Plus feels good when you are running fast. I mean, when you are running at a pretty good clip and you're up on your toes. When you are running up on your toes or hitting in your forefoot, you can really feel the spring of the carbon fiber plate moving you forward. When you slow down, let's say you're doing a warm-up before a workout, or perhaps a warm-up before a race, you're probably a little more likely to hit the back of the shoe. And to be honest, the back of the shoe on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is a bit of a dead zone. Like, they don't feel as good when you're running slow. The Endorphin Pro 3, I think, is going to be a little bit better suited to the general population. I mean, as far as super shoes goes, I think more people are going to benefit from the Endorphin Pro 3, because I found that when I am running at a slower pace, and a slower pace for me is when I am landing on my heel and rolling through my forefoot and then off. When I'm running at a slow pace and I'm actively heel striking, the Endorphin Pro 3 still feels really good. There is enough cushion in the heel where I don't feel that impact jolting through my body. Now, I also don't feel that impact when I'm wearing the MetaSpeed Sky Plus, but on the Endorphin Pro 3, I can kind of roll through my gait cycle a little easier than I can in the MetaSpeed Sky Plus. And I think we can also see that when we look at the outsole. Now, the outsole rubber on both these shoes is clearly made for forefoot striking. We have a lot more rubber on the forefoot of both of these shoes. However, on the lateral rear edge of the MetaSpeed Sky Plus, we see a little bit of white rubber right here. And when I'm running slow, that's generally the area that I hit the ground first. And this little bit of white rubber on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus seems like ASICS has included it just as a little protection. But clearly, the emphasis is on the forefoot. On the Endorphin Pro 3, we have quite a bit more rubber on the lateral side rear of the foot, and it is a little thicker than it is on the MetaSpeed Sky Plus. So let me break it down for you guys. When I'm running really fast, when I'm getting up on my toes, I would say that the MetaSpeed Sky Plus feels a little faster because the carbon fiber plate inside feels a little more aggressive when I'm up on my toes. The Endorphin Pro 3 is not as aggressive, and it's a little easier on your entire body and better suited to a wider range of paces. With that said, in my experience, I don't think the MetaSpeed Sky Plus is actually any faster than the Endorphin Pro 3. I just think when you're up on your forefoot, you interpret that feeling as moving you forward a little faster. And of course, my personal preference is a little higher drop. So when I come home from a run, from a workout, my feet feel better after I've been running in the Endorphin Pro 3 with the 8mm drop than they do in the 5mm drop with the MetaSpeed Sky Plus. Take that for what it's worth. Alright guys, of course, I will provide links to these shoes in the show notes below, and I want to hear from you. What is your super shoe of choice? Have you bought the Endorphin Pro 3 or the MetaSpeed Sky Plus this year? If you have, let me know your thoughts. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.